Hi, I'm Joshua Kervik, and welcome to another Death Battle prediction video, but first, Goro versus Machamp. It was pretty obvious that Machamp was going to get the win here, even though I do agree with the winner, there are a couple of things in the episode that I would like to kind of poke at a little bit. There were a few things that they did, like, for example, scaling Goro to Cabal's speed, even though the two have never been in the same room, even, much less fought. They don't have, like, similar lines of scaling or anything like that. It's just kind of there's a character in Mortal Kombat with a speed feat, let's apply it to Goro. Which is then weird, because they used that to say that Goro had the speed advantage, but if you apply the exact same logic to Machamp, even without using any sort of calculations, you can still say that Machamp should reasonably scale to Pidgeot, who flies at Mach 2 speeds, just stated in the Pokedex, and then Garchomp, who can fly faster than fighter jets, which would actually probably give it back the speed advantage. And again, those two are just Pokedex entries. They're not, like, based on any feats or calcs or anything like that. And it's kind of just weird that they applied scaling to somewhere where it just wasn't at all. I think it was probably for the purposes of just making it look like a slightly closer fight than it was. But ultimately, I'm kind of not a fan. They also didn't really go too far with any feats or scaling or anything like that for specific Machamps. They kind of just went with, like, a gameplay. They used just, like, Seismic Toss, the Pokedex entries, and that's kind of it. Which kind of gets into the issue that I kind of have with somewhat of how Death Battle portrays Pokemon. I don't like the idea that they use a wild version of the Pokemon, because it kind of limits them unnecessarily, and because of the fact that there aren't all that many showings of wild Pokemon in the series for the most part, it kind of just gives an excuse to ignore any feats of trained ones in favor of just kind of doing whatever you want with it. I kind of disagree with their methods of that. The alternative would be using any trained version of them that's actually canonically in the game. Not canonically in the game, but canonically in, like, anime and manga and such. Which at least gives you more to work with. And that was kind of the problem, is that this episode did feel very bare bones in terms of, like, they didn't go over a whole hell of a lot. They kind of just treated it like a National Geographic skit and moved on. It was like, I did actually see a quote from the writer of the episode, which I believe was Josh. He said that he, like, kind of intentionally kept it really brief because I think it was something to the extent of, like, just wanting to get to the fight itself and that being the more exciting part of the fight. But I think that's a bad mentality to take, is skimping out on, like, any of the details or, like, actually going into the characters as much in favor of just having a short episode. I personally enjoy learning more and more about the characters or seeing them more faithfully represented. So that's a bit of a mixed bag for me. I think that this episode is largely carried by its animation, which was really friggin' good. The Machamp was really hilarious in terms of, like, they gave him, like, a really good personality. And just, it was very well choreographed. The whole fight was just pretty entertaining. The music was really good. And then the kill shot was great as well. So I really don't have anything to complain about as far as the animation goes. It was more the analysis and how it was presented that I kind of have an issue with. But then we get to Cable versus Booster Gold. Now, this is the first time, I'm pretty sure, in the history of Death Battle that they have announced a character that I didn't know of at the time of it being announced. I've since learned more about Booster Gold, but I actually didn't know about him at all before this. And from the descriptions that I've gotten from people, he actually sounds like a pretty wildly entertaining character. ultimately, though, there's kind of a lot of weirdness with this fight because it does involve time travel. So not only is it a battle of stats, but also a battle of whose time travel is superior. Um, First we'll go into the basic thing, which is I'm going to play kind of one of the advantage cards right out the gate because it's going to kind of show the tone of things. So the belt that Booster Gold has is actually stolen from the future, from a museum that was apparently worn by Brainiac 5, I believe it was. So that is a future version of Brainiac superior to the current ones that are dealt with in like the DC Comics. So reasonably speaking, it should be it's better barriers. It can apparently keep things out even on a microscopic level, block telepathy even as far as some of the strongest telepaths in the DC universe. Has tanked attacks from Green Lanterns, Doomsday, etc. and so forth. He also has a ring that lets him fly and gives him super speed, with which he has gone fast enough to tap into the Speed Force and hit, I believe it was Barry, was the Flash that he hit. So that's a pretty tall order. We're already going with fast enough to tap into the Speed Force and barriers strong enough to resist the likes of even better than Brainiac. And Brainiac is already like a really, really powerful villain in the DC universe. Cable has his telekinesis and largely weaponry. Honestly, a lot of his weaponry is just getting thrown out right off the bat because there's not a chance in hell of them getting by the barriers. So it kind of comes down to the fact that most of what Cable has just isn't going to do anything. He's also far slower because, tagging the Flash and tapping into the Speed Force definitely gives him the advantage in that regard. But let's say that they get to the point where they can use their time travel capabilities in this fight. That actually just kind of makes it even more busted for Booster Gold, if anything. There is an entity known as Wave Rider that is basically what Booster Gold becomes after kind of taking things seriously and becoming like the time travel superhero. And it has a lot of really, really busted capabilities, including being completely intangible and being made of chronal energy, which basically means it's made of time. It can erase timelines at a whim, boost his stats even further, and just like it's completely broken. If they do include Wave Rider, Cable's done. There's not a chance in hell he has. So the reason, but then some of you may be thinking basically, why would you include Wave Rider when it's a future version of Booster Gold? It is not Booster Gold himself. So Booster Gold actually has had numerous times where he has used the time travel capabilities that he has to pull a bunch of versions of himself from various timelines, points in time, etc., and so forth. So, reasonably speaking, Wave Rider is on the table in terms of being able to be used. And I forget what it was called. It was like a little robot thing that Booster Gold has. It was Skeets. That's his name. So basically, it is a security robot AI that is capable of tracking time travelers to exactly where they've gone, when they've gone, etc. so forth. So even if Cable does go back in time, Booster Gold / Wave Rider is still going to be able to find exactly where he is and just smush him in time. Just nothing that Cable has is like, he is an Omega class mutant. He has taken hits from some pretty strong Marvel characters, but I think as we've been seeing lately, when you get to the higher tier characters, DC is just significantly stronger than Marvel. There's just been so many times in Death Battle even, I think we're at the 20th DC versus Marvel fight, and outside of like Ghost Rider versus Lobo, I'm pretty sure the last like 8 fights have all gone to DC. I generally, how I see it is that the street level fights usually go in the favor of Marvel. So you have like your Batman versus Spider-Man type fights, and then when you start getting to the higher tier characters, it tends to go to the DC side pretty easily. And all Booster Gold needed was consistent showings against some of the Herald tier characters in DC, and just he wins. It becomes fairly obvious when you start looking at it like that. He's fought characters like Superman, Martian Manhunter, The Flash, and just there's just not really very many options. Even hacking and stuff like that won't work because, again, it has to get by the barrier. And the suit itself runs on 25th century power source that typically lasts for hours and days of active fighting and things like that. There's not really any reason that it should run out in the fight, considering that, reasonably speaking, at the start of the fight it would be at full capacity. So it won't last long enough until Wave Rider decides to poke his head in and immediately kill Cable. So that's kind of how I think that it's going to go for this one. And I currently do actually have a perfect record for this season so far in terms of predictions, so I'm kind of hoping to keep that up a little bit at the very least. But I will see you guys next time when the episode comes out on YouTube on May 4th. So I'm going to go ahead and make the big brain guess that we are getting Obi-Wan versus Kakashi as the next fight. So I can't imagine that they would pass up the opportunity to have Obi-Wan, who we know is going to be in this season. I would be very surprised if they passed up on the opportunity to have Obi-Wan on May the 4th. It's just a very obvious joke. It's just teeing it right up for them to knock that one out of the park. So I will see you guys for the next one. Have a good one.